So you're a political centrist, but you frequently criticized capitalism in the past. What do you think is its biggest problem, and what do you think the solution is?
I think, well, capitalism's biggest problem is that it dehumanizes. It makes everyone a number. Um, this has been true for the last however many hundred years since I guess formal capitalism came along. I guess you could call it probably since the 17th century. Things like the Hudson's Bay Company and whatnot. There's the old saying that uh, capitalism knows the price of everything but the value of nothing, or something to that regard. I think maybe Ambrose Bierce might have said that. Um, but the problem is with capitalism in general is that there is no accounting for the nuances. Capitalism is just very cold cut, very cutthroat. Uh, it's the 180 degrees almost from communism or rampant socialism that uh, was around in the 20th century, and that. But they both end up dehumanizing people. Yes, you could argue capitalism. We didn't have gulag camps, but capitalism also fostered a lot of wars of aggression and post-colonial and I guess colonialism it could be considered the roots of capitalism. Um, as for how to combat it, I think it's an evolutionary process. I was telling Jessica because as I've mentioned, I've had a recent downturn. I was telling Jessica the other day that I think human beings just need to evolve out of certain monkey simian-like behaviors. Uh, we evolved and deception. We learned to be deceivers. I was watching a video from a guy named Nicholas Humphrey called I forget he's a British guy. He declined being interviewed, but he had a show in the mid '80s that I saw that I recently rewatched online about the human mind and whatnot. And the simians for simians it was good to be a deceiver. If you could deceive someone and hide take two nuts while everyone else in the band or the tribe had one, that was good for you because then you had twice as much food. You had twice as much survival chance. And but we haven't weaned ourselves off of this. We have a staggering amount of excess food, despite millions of people that are starving in Africa or Asia or South America, or even in Appalachia and other parts of the U.S. So much food goes to waste. We could feed everyone in this world really about 10 times over. If you're looking at production, if we maximize the production of our farms to their max, we could easily accommodate, and I've read this multiple places, 40 to 50 billion people on this planet. The reason that we have a population crisis is that we don't know how, and capitalism is all about making money. It's not about getting the best solution. It's about short-term thinking. Capitalism never thinks ahead. And that's the basic problem with it. Yes, there are going to be some people, companies that do think ahead or whatnot. But look who's touted as a visionary. Is Steve Jobs really a visionary? I mean, he died a year or two ago, and I think there was a movie made about him, and there are countless articles. What did he really do, though? I mean, he made entertainment more accessible. That's about it. I mean, you cannot compare a Steve Jobs or a Steve Wozniak, who also founded Apple, or Bill Gates. You can't compare these people with the Edisons. And I know Edison didn't invent a lot of his stuff, or the Marconis, or the Teslas, or the Eli Whitneys, because someone would come along and have invented this stuff. And what has it really done? It's made society easier to get certain kinds of information. But who's the Steve Jobs of food production? We have now genetically modified food, and despite while there are some good GMO kind of foods that have potential and whatnot, a lot of them have a lot of issues. One of the worst things that capitalism did is we should not be able to patent life. You should not be able to patent a certain type of wheat seed. You should not be able to patent eventually animal life. And they've done it with protozoans. I think, that forget about the ethics of it. The just on a basic level, you can't, for example, companies like Monsanto have sued farmers for growing Monsanto type wheat when their wheat blew over from a Monsanto field a mile away and fertilized the other guy's uh, farm. Now, the company is suing farmers because of their negligence. The farmer should be able to sue Monsanto and say, get your fucking GMO food off my goddamn land. But that's not the way it works, because the small farmer, and this has been a problem I've read really bad in like Alberta and Saskatchewan in Canada, especially where Monsanto has a lot of influence. But the little guy gets screwed, just like the little guy gets screwed at work, just like the little property owner gets screwed when a big property owner comes along. Just like if you go into court, if you don't have money, you're not going to win. You know, I've had people threaten to sue me or whatnot. I've had corporations that have sent me letters about this, that, or the other thing. With personal property issues or something, and you have to back down because you can't go up against this megalith. These monoliths rather. And so the little guy is always good, and that's one of the basic problems of capitalism. So you have to. I think we slowly will evolve out of this. On civil liberties issues, we've gotten a lot better. This year in 2015, homosexuals got the right to marry. Probably within 10 or 15 years, polygamy will be legalized. By the end of this century, if we do get artificial intelligence, I'm sure that AIs and human beings will be able to uh, form unions of something. But we have been woefully lacking in the more practical day-to-day things. And I'm not trying to put down civil rights or gay rights or women's rights or anything, but I'm talking about things that affect everyone. Workers' rights affect everyone. It doesn't just affect homosexuals who make up maybe 1 to 3% of the population. It doesn't affect just black people who make up what it might be 8 or 10% of the population now. It doesn't affect women who are half the population, but everyone. And until we evolve and get rid of these tendencies for just selfishness, it's going to be a problem. And I think that wealth, and I think that technology will help do that, because even today some poor person can have their 500 channels of cable. They can have their little iPhone if they want, relatively cheaply. It's not as cheap as it should be, because telecommunications and cable television are two of the biggest ripoffs out there. I know when I worked, at AT&T, even a decade and a half ago, the stuff was remarkably cheap. But anyway, so that's as far as capitalism. I think it's something that will slowly evolve out. Uh, Maybe not your children, Alex, but maybe if you have children and they have children, your grandchildren in the latter part of this century may live in a world that's not going to have polar ice caps, and there's probably going to be a lot less familiar species here or there. But I don't think it's an Armageddon. I think the society will be better. I think, as you had said in the interview, the tendency towards mediocrity will mediate people's reactionary ways towards things. And I think people will say, the hell with this go, 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 go. Let's do this. Got to be on time with this, meet this deadline. And I'm not saying people shouldn't meet deadlines if they promise something, but to act as if these things are somehow sacrosanct, as if these are the great pillars of society. They're not. They're simply not. So that's my long answer to your shorter question.